Thank you so much for returning to Mastering Counseling. We're so excited today to have Maelisa McCaffrey with us. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and worked for various agencies in the past, but is now most known as a documentation diva, as she has begun QA prep and does a whole lot for therapists in keeping track of all of those important notes and confidential things. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Maelisa.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we look forward to talking about this side of therapy, as I myself haven't gone too deep into people's personal notes and all of that. So I can't wait to hear from an expert like you. Why don't we talk about the beginning of your life and mental health and how you chose to go the psychologist route, and then we'll kind of talk about your company that you own now.
Yeah. Well, I know when I was in my bachelor's degree program, I went in thinking like, I'm going to do the least amount of work possible and get my master's degree. And I realized very quickly how broad the field of psychology is. And I was like, you can get 10 doctorates and still be learning. So I was like, well, let me just do this doctorate thing straight off and be done. So went and became a psychologist. So ironically, as the person who was just dying to get out of school, went and did the doctorate right away. And so I was really young. So I was like Dr. McCaffrey at, age 25, 26. When I was starting off, and got lots and lots of different types of experiences, because my first full-time job was as a psychologist. Before that I was in school and working, but I think allowed me the flexibility that you have when you're younger to try out different things and not worry so much about, like, yes, I was worried about making money, but when you're 25, 26, you're a little bit more okay with not making as much money and just doing things to learn, then I wouldn't necessarily have that flexibility at this point in my life.
So you're very glad you did it when you were young, right away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I meet lots of people who have done it the opposite, and it all works in its different time.
Right.
But thankfully I've had a lot of different experiences, from like psychological testing and working in community colleges to doing crisis response, to working in mental health agencies, working with career assessments, so school-based counseling, and now all of that various experience that felt like a little bit at the time I was just trying to figure myself out and what I liked to do is invaluable now, because I can work with so many different therapists, because I likely have experience in whatever it is that they're doing and have worked in that setting.
Right. Yeah. When you say you could go to school forever, that is certainly true, right? Because in this field, there's so many angles, and I would say the general population, a lot of people are lumped together: social workers, therapists, counselors, school counselors, psychologists, and really they do all have their own special roles. So that's awesome that you've gotten to participate in a lot of them. When you were going for your doctorate, were you working in community agencies then, in like practicing then while getting that further degree?
Yeah, I was working in mental health agencies, the community colleges, not necessarily college counseling, but working in the disabled student center. So a little bit of college counseling with students there, but also learning disability assessments, and then my internships in the crisis response team and the school-based counseling. And I also worked at a psych hospital during that time too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you have been in a lot of places, so very cool.
Yeah.
Tell us now about the vision behind QA Prep, which I just want to read it specifically: transforming the way therapists approach clinical documentation. That's a little better words than I originally said. So how did you come to know this is where you definitely wanted to be, and what does that organization look like?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I got kind of burnt out on doing client work, and took a little break as I was studying for licensing as well, and got a job doing QA, so quality assurance, in an
Mm.
agency. And through that process, thankfully, that particular agency was very, very heavy on training their clinicians. And it was a very large agency in California. And so it had, dozens of locations. And so they were able to have multiple full-time QA people. And we were encouraged to spend a lot of our time creating trainings, actually talking with clinicians. So I wasn't sitting there just auditing charts all day. And so I found through that process that I really enjoyed it. And I was actually really good at creatively, making new handouts for people, or giving these clinicians like new ways or easier ways to do things like their treatment plans and their progress notes. And I loved working with the supervisors to help their clinicians make things more easy. And as I was doing that, and I'd have therapists literally call me up in my office and say, "Hey, I just had this scenario happen. How do I write this progress note?" for example. And I started thinking, all my friends in private practice, like, what did they do? I'm sure they have these questions too. So I started asking them, and took some of them for coffee and was like, "Hey, like, I'm doing this now. Is this something that you would be interested in?" And all of them were like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I need this. There's no one to help me with this. We never learned any of this in grad school." So I was like, okay, like, this could be a thing. And my original idea was to maybe pitch universities to add this as a graduate school course. Because the thing I consistently heard and still hear is, why didn't we ever learn this in grad school? And I was thinking about doing that. Thankfully, I talked with a business coach as I was thinking about this, because I don't know any entrepreneurs. I know nothing about starting a business, right? And I wasn't even thinking of it from that angle. I was like, oh, I'll just be like an adjunct professor. And I talked to this business coach, and she was like, "Do not do that. This is so necessary." She was like, "I work with therapists who need this help all the time. Like, make this your own thing. You could literally have a business doing this." And I was like, "What? Really?" So I did, and I really hunkered down and joined this, program where I learned about, like, how do you even start a business? Like, what do I even need to do? and and then was like, well, let me put it out there. And I did a in-person workshop, and it sold out in like 2 days. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something there. So then I started, putting more effort into building this business and learning about things like online business, because I was still working full time. And at that time, I was also commuting 3 hours a day on certain days to go to my job. And so I had very limited time and needed it to be an online, slightly more automated thing initially. So I really set things up to be that way in the very beginning. But it continued to, just grow and grow and grow the more that I poured into it. So it's, to where it is now. And this has now been 10 years that I've had
Okay,
this
yeah, I
business.
wanted to ask when this all evolved. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so since 2014 or ish.
hmm
Okay. Wow, that's so exciting. So now, is it still you running the entire thing? Okay.
For the
Or
most
did
part,
you have to hire others?
I have an assistant now, and I have a
Okay.
project manager. So,
Mm.
part of the thing with all of this is I have ADHD. I am not a naturally organized person. So I am not necessarily like this type A person that you would think might be training people on documentation. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Like, I say, I have to pay my project manager to be my handler and tell me, like, I have to pay her to tell me what to do. um, so that has helped a lot. And that's like a whole other podcast, right? Talking about like the business strategy there and getting the support you need to run one. So I do have support, and I also have an accountant that I have to meet with her. Like, I won't get all the businessy things done that I need to get done if I don't actually sit down and meet with someone. So I've invested in that, and that's helped a lot with continuing to grow the business.
No, I love that you said you're not an organized person and that you're doing because yeah, notes and charts and all of that, you would think that, but it's if you have the right people helping you, it doesn't matter. So that's very cool. Um, so because sometimes we do talk a lot about the business side of things in here, project manager, I have not heard as often that a lot of our guests, a lot of them have admin people, accountants for sure. Project managers, not as much. So how, why do they have that title? What projects, I guess, are they managing?
Yeah, I mean, she's managing, I mean, almost the whole business, right? As far as she helps me with things like, for example, I just met with her before this we were recording, and I'm writing a book, and like I know the content. I've written so many blog post articles and YouTube scripts and all these things. I have the content down, but I need someone to help me plan out all the things that you need to do to get a book done. And it's a lot of steps, and it just would not. I have thought about writing a book for probably 8 years. But now that I have her and we've worked on things, and it's something I've talked to her about for so long that last year she was like, okay, when are we writing this book? We're nailing down dates. We're putting this together. We're getting this done. She's checking in with me. So it's partly accountability, but also letting me, think through things. So I've been known to think up a webinar idea, for example, like today, and then, I'll spend 2 hours creating this, it's an awesome webinar. And then I'm like, I'll just, launch that next week. And she'll be like, no, no, no. Okay. What's their timeline? Why are you doing this? What is this for? And so she definitely keeps my ADHD in check and helps me think through things strategically and really think through, like, do you realistically have time for both of these things? So which one is important? And so I think for my model, because it is more program based, and I do things like I run groups, but a lot of my business is fairly automated. And so when I do have projects, they're bigger scale, maybe more long-term projects, and she really helps me think through all of that.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you for the explanation, and the pairing of those two types of careers together is really awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you become known as the documentation diva?
Yeah. Well, honestly, my late friend, Roy Huggins, who many people might know from Person-Centered Tech. So he was like a tech guy and a counselor, who's no longer with us. But he and I met early on in both of our careers, starting businesses and doing these online things for therapists. And that's what he started calling me. So he would, I would come in and do trainings for his community, and he would say, here's the documentation diva. And I was like, I love this name.
Yeah, that's
So it's
super
worked.
fun. I like that. So let's kind of talk about, I know your project manager handles it a lot, and you said you run groups, and I know you're doing webinars. Is there any typical type of week for you where you do things on one day or another, or is everything just always different all the time, based on what your clients needs? How does your schedule look?
Yeah, I would say it used to be a lot more all over the place. And the project manager has helped me nail this down, which I really tried to revolt against. And it's, absolutely beneficial for me and the clients that I work with. So I run a couple of groups every week, and those are very consistently done like every Thursday or Wednesday. And those are groups for therapists who are behind in their paperwork. So it's all like accountability and support, both giving them the practical tools that they need, but also giving them a space to talk about it and talk about what struggles they're having, and along with problem solving with them. So a lot of my time is spent, in those groups, running the groups, and then outside of that, being in the online community and responding to people as they have questions, or even, posting their wins and, just celebrating their wins with them along the way. And then I do individual consultations. So those are a little bit at random, but I have kind of, set times in my schedule that are always available. So then things like this, whether it's collaborating, I've been doing a lot with these new AI tech companies that are coming out geared for therapists. A lot of them, I've been doing a YouTube series on using AI for your progress notes. So they're all paying attention to that and contacting me. So it's not uncommon that I have at least one meeting with one of these companies a week now. And then a lot of my time is also content creation. So pretty much at least every other week, I'll need to kind of rearrange my entire living room, set it up to be a YouTube studio, and record videos. And then the weeks that I'm not doing that are typically spent doing research for those videos, creating the scripts, and getting that kind of stuff ready.
Okay. This is also fascinating. I wanted to write down 5 questions as you were talking about all the different things. So let's talk about my one thought was with the groups you do and with it being all online, I'm imagining the therapists are possibly all over the nation and only know each other through your group.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And many of them, that is the point of the group is, about 3 years ago, I did a lot more individual consultations, and it got to the point where I was seeing, 10 people in a week who all had the same problem and all were telling me they thought were the only therapist in the world who has this problem. And I was kind of like, I really did not want to do groups because I didn't want to lock myself into a schedule. And it is the best thing I've ever done because that's what everyone needed. They needed to literally join a Zoom room and see that there were 40 other people online who are there because they all have the same problem. And it helped me where, now I can one time a week say this to all these people instead of doing this through all these individual consultations with them.
Yeah. And I would imagine 40 times over the same discussion, that would make me crazy as a person of variety. So yeah. But yeah, 40. So is that the cap of how big a group will be? That, I mean, a lot of like therapy type groups are 8 to 10, but this is obviously different. So what do those numbers look like? Around 40 usually?
So we typically have about 100 in a group, but I will have multiple meeting times. So typically about 40 people will attend like each meeting time that week. And I'll do like Mondays, I'll do a training for the group. So I'll have like a weekly topic, but it's all around all of the resources I found, over these last 10 years that when people are behind, what they need. So for example, a lot of times it's people are really behind in their paperwork because when they sit down to write a note, they don't know what to write and it takes them half an hour to write a progress note. So if it takes you half an hour to write a progress note and you have 25 clients a week, you're probably not getting all those notes done every week. And then it becomes something you avoid because it feels so stressful and it takes you so long. So a lot of it is around training on here's a note template. Here's how to use checkboxes. Here's how to save yourself time doing this, along with things like creating a schedule, time management strategies, that kind of thing. And then the other groups are, so we do a training one part of the week, and then at the end of the week, we do sharing. So it's quick kind of accountability style, like do your check-in and having everyone check in through those groups. So that's how we're able to have more members in a group. But people also do get to know one another pretty well. And they frequently will go through the group a few times because they find the accountability so helpful.
Yeah. No, I'm glad the next thing I was going to ask was the actual content. So that's good to hear. Like, you're really breaking down, in the moment, how are you writing that note? What chart are you using? And I imagine there's a ton of like online printables that are presented to help people scale back their time. So very, very cool. Let's talk a little bit. You mentioned they will share at the end some success. And you had talked about people celebrating their wins. Is there a certain client that you feel like you could share how they've had so much success over long term? A story like that we would love to hear.
Yeah. I have one client. There are 2 clients that come to mind, and one is someone I worked with many years ago, and one is a lot more recent. So the one from many years ago, they came to me, they had moved states, and it was the type of thing where they said, I never used to have problems getting my notes done. But after I moved, something happened, and, this is a very common story where people tell me that some life circumstance changed or occurred, and it sort of triggered this falling behind. And then so they were really struggling to get their notes done and had, I think it was like 11 or 1,200 notes, progress notes that they needed to do. So this felt extremely
Oh,
overwhelming.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's a problem, and this is not an uncommon story.
Mm.
So if someone's listening to
11
this,
to 1,200. I am
yeah,
shocked. I mean, I guess
yeah,
I'm like, how do you even remember
yeah.
anything?
And that's another one of the things that often comes up, right? Is like, okay, it's not just a matter of making a plan to catch up. It's also, what do I do when I don't remember what happened? Because yeah, you might be able to give me a summary of what happened with client A, but you probably can't tell me what happened in a session on September 22nd of last year with client A, right? You know, you would have to, even if you've taken notes to yourself, you might not remember that super well. So anyway, so I worked with this person to get them caught up, and it took over a year, and they had to take some breaks, but it was about making a sustainable plan, right? It's not, let's get you caught up in a month, because that's just not realistic. And one of the things I find is that people will then focus on getting caught up, and then they'll ignore this week's notes. And then it's just a problem that keeps getting pushed and pushed back, and then it becomes a recurring cycle. So I worked with them on, okay, stop, continuing the pattern. Like, let's get you in a regular schedule of writing your list now. What does that look like? How can you do it? And then creating a catch-up plan. Like I said, it was long-term. But now I continue to do co-working groups so people who I've worked with previously can still come to our monthly co-working groups that we do. And so that person will still come, years later and be like, hey, I'm all caught up, but I'm just doing today's notes, and they'll show up for an hour. And it's so fun to see that. And then, so that's, I would say, a more common story of someone who, is willing to look at it more long term. And then a person who just joined this most recent group, we had a different strategy for them, and they were like, okay, I'm starting fresh right now. And every week now they've been getting their notes done. And they're like, this is amazing, because I gave them a template. They use the template, and they're like, I am writing a note in 4 minutes, and it used to take me 25 minutes. And so now this is something that I actually feel they're more motivated to say, you know what, let me not go home. Let me actually do these notes. Because if you know it's going to take you 15 minutes to get those notes done, you're a lot more likely to follow through than if you're like, oh, this is going to be a stressful hour and a half. So I'm just going to go home and maybe I'll do them tomorrow. And so this person, it's really, really helped with their motivation and just getting them done.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think especially in this line of work where, the people they're helping are in cycles and patterns that are very difficult. And then and often, right, I mean, sometimes people might end the counseling or therapy, but often they might be back. It just doesn't always feel like you're checking a box like, oh, I fixed your car, now you're good. It's usually like that. So for the therapist to say, okay, this is something that I did complete, even if the person obviously still has more to work on, I at least have up-to-date notes. It must be a good feeling. So yeah, that's amazing. I can see why you are called the documentation diva. And this is fascinating because, like I said, we haven't really delved too much into this before. Why don't we think about, are there some common misconceptions about clinical documentation that you feel like are out there? What are some of those things?
Yeah, I think the two most harmful ones that I have seen over the past decade is number one, that no one gets behind in their notes, that I must be the only one. And that is a very devastating misconception, because if you're the clinician, there's a huge sense of shame around it, and they often feel like there's no one they can talk to. They're terrified. And I mean, people are literally losing sleep over this. And I can't tell you how many therapists I've worked with who have said, I've thought about letting my license go and just becoming a coach so that I don't have to deal with the documentation. And you're my last hope. Like, this is the last thing I'm going to try before I actually take that step. So, so I think it's a big misconception that other therapists must have it together and must know what they're doing. No, most of them don't. And related to that, I always love working with supervisors, clinical supervisors, group practice owners, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you will work with a clinician who has this issue. And if you're someone who didn't have that issue yourself, it can feel like, what's wrong with this person? Why aren't they getting their notes done? So it's also important for those therapists to know this is a common problem. And it's often not a basic time management issue that a clinician needs to work with. It's more often about the confidence and documentation and helping someone with that. So I'd say that's one of the most harmful misconceptions. And then the other one is that paperwork is punishment. And so I think many of us who started out in agencies had to do all of this documentation, and it felt redundant, and it was, it felt crazy making, and it often was not realistic to do in your 40-hour work week. And so you would have to, spend all this extra time, and it was very stressful. And documentation does not actually have to be painful. And so what often happens is I work with people, they start feeling better about the paperwork, and then the first thing they tell me is, am I doing it wrong? I must be doing it wrong because that felt too easy. And I'm like, no, it's okay for it to feel easy. It's okay to feel confident about it. But it's a mindset shift that people struggle with. They think this must be painful for it to be a good note.
Yeah. It's like a burden that they don't want to let go of. Like they're so used to it that they don't know what to do without it. So
exactly.
So what would be some of the on the actual forms or documents that you would use? How does it simplify from being a half an hour to 5-minute thing? Just like a couple ideas that you could give us.
Yeah, the quick thing is stop writing in full sentences. There's no law or rule that you have to, unless you have a particular supervisor who's telling you have to do that. And then maybe have them listen to this. So, and the thing is, as an auditor, so like as someone who has audited lots and lots of progress notes, I much prefer to read bullet points or little dashes and phrases than to read a huge paragraph of text. And also as an auditor, the more I'm reading and have to search through paragraphs to find what I'm looking for, the more I'm also finding other things that you don't want me to find, right? Or the more I'm having to read details about your client that maybe you feel uncomfortable with other people reading. So when you use like bullet points, quick phrases, which you can do either through having a checkbox list that's pre-created, but also detailed. If you create that yourself, you can really personalize it to the way you work, to the way the type of clients you see, or you can just use the bullet point strategy you could literally do that now, right? The next progress note you write, stop using sentences and just use bullet points. Topics discussed included, and then list them. Parenting strategies, relationship issue, right? I mean, you can keep it that broad. And that does take a little practice, but that's why people then are like, whoa, is this good enough? Is this really okay? But I think that's one of the biggest things that I did, because I knew I would drown in the paperwork. And I always got huge compliments on my documentation. And I was like, I'm just doing this so I can make it doable. Right. And then, like I said, as an auditor, that is so much easier to read. And you'll find, going back and looking at your own notes, it's so much easier to review. You're a lot more likely to find them useful if you write them that way. And then, so I'd say as far as documentation goes, that's the biggest thing. And related to that is end your sessions on time. So those are two things you can do for free and you can do right now.
No, I love that. As someone I'm an elementary school counselor, and in a building of over 600 kids, and I am the king of dashes and bullet points. I'm glad to hear this, because I'm like, the idea to me of writing in full sentences, I don't think it ever occurred. It was just not possible. So
Yeah.
it's really good to hear from you that is okay. Um, so my next question, how do you see the future of documentation maybe changing a little bit? Or, and how does the whole AI affect these things? And you mentioned talking with different companies. I know some about AI, but like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to give more software, or I don't know. I can't even phrase the question because I don't know what to ask. But how is AI going to help you? I guess.
Yeah. So there's good and bad news here.
Yeah.
I'm testing all of these different AI platforms, and thankfully a lot of them are giving me like a free account to actually use it and try it out. So I've played around with a lot of them. I have yet to find one that actually saves anyone anytime. So if you use this bullet point strategy I just talked about and kind of create for yourself these cheat sheets you could use with your notes, there is no way using a HIPAA compliant, HIPAA secure AI system is going to save you time, because you have to tell the AI platform what the session was about. And then it produces a note for you, or you log into an AI platform. So some of these platforms that are already around, you log in and you do your session there, or it listens to a transcript of the session and then it creates a note for you. They're not like ChatGPT, which is not HIPAA secure and you cannot use for your progress notes. There is no such thing as de-identifying a note enough to make it HIPAA secure in ChatGPT. So if you use one of these platforms, they're not as quick and easy, and you have to enter the data somehow. And you need to get permission from your clients as well, right? So not all clients are going to be okay with that. Many are, I think, more so than therapists think, but there's still going to be clients that won't be that won't feel secure using an AI. So then the system produces a note for you. Then you have to review the note and make sure it's accurate. Every single one of these platforms, as awesome as they are and as impressive as some of the feedback is and some of the way it writes the notes is, every single time they make a somewhat significant mistake, and it's something that needs to be corrected. So it's not like you can just trust it. You have to read through the note and likely change something. So I don't know if that will improve over time, or, as people get more comfortable with AI, I see that it likely will become integrated with electronic health records, where you sign up for your electronic health record and they've probably contracted with one of these AI companies so that when you do your note, you have the option of using this AI platform directly within your EHR. That's what I envision. But I also, even talking with one of these companies, the founder said, I don't see how this saves anyone time. I could see maybe the first few times, but after that, why wouldn't you just use your own cheat sheet or your own notes? So that's to say, I think there's some benefit to it. It can be worth playing around with, but it is not the magic bullet that a lot of clinicians want it to be. You're much better off creating like cheat sheets and keeping yourself succinct and feeling confident about your own skills, because then you really can write a few-minute progress note, and then you don't even really need an AI platform that might take 10 minutes to write your note for you.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking and I'm thinking, it's like this whole world we're in is everything about people and how human they are and how everyone is so individual. So, AI can give you the recipes for anything that's super black and white, right? It can happen. But when it comes to the human story and everyone's personal experience, nothing can really always be the same. So, but yeah, I'm so glad that we talked about that, and that you kind of shared what you're seeing on the platforms that you're experiencing. So yeah. Well, we've talked about a whole lot today, and I've just really been fascinated. I could probably talk for 3 more hours. Is there anything else that you feel like you'd want us to know about the work you're doing, or the clients that you're helping?
I think,
Sorry about that.
No problem. But I have lots of free resources. There are so many resources out there. There's no one perfect way to write a progress note. There's no one perfect way to write a treatment plan. There's no one perfect schedule. So if there's anything I would want people to know, it's that. And trust your gut. So gather resources, whether it's from me, from other people doing this type of stuff. Create your templates, create your systems, and then stick with it and let it be easy. But don't worry about trying to recreate the wheel every 3 months, because it's probably not necessary.
That makes so much sense. Thank you for that.